Why, hello, everyone. Hello. What is up, guys? If you don't know this voice by now, then why are you watching this YouTube video or listening to this podcast on Amazon Music Podcast or Apple Podcast? What is up, guys? This is James, aka Jimmypancakes20, back here to do a new episode of the Jimmypancakes20 Show. And boy, is this going to be a good one. This is going to be finally, after almost a month, our continuation of our Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood 2010 history videos / podcast. And this episode is episode 20. This is part 2, where I am joined by my co-host. And I'm going to introduce her before I continue telling you what we're going to be talking about in this video / podcast. Welcome back, my co-host, my mom, Marsha. So, Mom, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
So, Mom, are you excited to talk about Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood 2010 Part 2?
Yes, I'm very excited.
You were joining me for Part 1, and now you're back here for Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, this was Marsha's second year of going to Halloween Horror Nights consistently. She did not go in 2008. 2008 was my first year going, but then she came a full going every year since 2009. So this was her second full year of going. But I do remember you went the closing night of 2008.
Right.
So we can technically count that, but you didn't. You only experienced those mazes one time, that one night.
That is correct. I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I only went one night.
Mm-hmm. But ever since 2009, we've gone every single year, except for 2020 when COVID happened and the event got canceled. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so as I said, this is episode 20 of the Jimmypancakes20 Show. This is part 2 of our Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood 2010 history video part 2. And in this video, we are going to talk about the remaining maze. We have one more maze that we have to talk about, which is Saw Game On. Not Game Over, but it was called Saw Game On. And then we're going to talk about the Terror Tram, which was themed to a certain character that has come back to the Halloween event multiple times, including in 2023, where he has his own maze again. If you don't know who I'm talking about, Chucky. Chucky was the theme for the Terror Tram this year, which was called the Terror Tram Chucky's Revenge. We'll get into why it was called Revenge. And then to wrap up this video, we're going to talk about the 6 or 7 scare zones. And then that'll be the end of this episode 20, part 2 of our Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood 2010 history video. And then episode 21 is going to be the third and final part. We're only going to talk about the one show that was there that year, which was Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. All right, so I just wanted to give a little brief so everyone knows, because I know a lot of people ask about what this podcast / video is about. And I know a lot of people are wondering, well, where are the photos that you usually show on the YouTube photos? Fortunately, my laptop is updating right now with a whole bunch of stuff. So fortunately, it's not going to be working for at least a couple of hours. And I wanted to get this video / podcast out. So hopefully for part 3, we can show some images of the Bill and Ted show from 2010. But this is just going to be our voices for the video form that's going up on YouTube, as well as the audio form on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music Podcasts. All right, guys, so I just wanted to get that out of the way too, while you're seeing just our voices and not any photos. So there you go. So ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 20 of the Jimmypancakes20 Show, part 2 of our Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood 2010 history video / podcast. So Mom, when you found out that Saw was coming back for 2010, what did you think? Because, we did tell a story of how you got sick and you had to leave the maze in 2009, and we talk about it in part 2 of our history for Halloween Horror Nights 2009. She tells a story of what happened. So, what did you think when it was coming back for 2010?
Oh no, am I going to get sick again? That's what I was thinking. Because if you guys don't know the story, I got sick in the bathroom scene. I had to run out of the maze. But I think they toned it down a little bit.
Yeah.
The second time I went in the maze, it was a lot better.
We were talking about in 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's why I had to run out.
Right.
2010, it was A-okay for me.
You didn't get sick in 2010.
No, I did not.
Because they brought that bathroom scene back.
But they toned it down.
They toned it down way much more because I think they had a lot of complaints from people that got sick in that scene because they were pumping that scent so much and it was way too much. Mm-hmm. And I even heard that some of the actors that were in that room were even getting sick too.
Right. But when I heard it was coming back, I said, game on. Try me again.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And as Marsha referenced, and I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the title for the Saw maze for this year was Saw Game On. And of course, it had to be back behind the Mummy ride this year as it was in 2009.
Right.
So, here's the description. Jigsaw's twisted lifestyle lives on through his demented followers. However, somewhere down the line, his vision of teaching people the value of life was lost. Demoted followers are now ready to show. The rules have changed, and that means bad news for you. Get ready to face a gruesome of death traps inspired by the most horrendous traps from the Saw film franchise. I was like, when I read that description, I was like, okay, so this is the second time they're doing the Saw maze, so what new scenes could they do? Because I think Saw 4 just came out, so they had Saw 1, 2, 3, and then 4 to go with. And I think 5 was either in production or it was coming out in theaters that October. I don't really remember.
I think it was October, James.
When Saw 5 was coming out that year? Yeah.
I think it was October. I remember.
Okay.
So.
But yeah. So, we're going to go for the maze like we did for, 2009. The facade for this maze was the warehouse / workshop of Jigsaw again, or his real name is John Kramer. He was played by Toby Bell. He did return for Saw 10, the latest Saw movie that came out, I think a year ago or 2 years ago.
Oh.
He's still playing John Kramer, but I don't know how many more Saw movies he's going to do before he is done. But that's who plays Jigsaw, aka John Kramer. And then, of course, like last year, you saw Billy the Puppet saying, "Do you want to play a game?" And then you saw the props and equipment from Jigsaw. his workbench where his tools were and stuff like that. Same from 2009. And then, as I did mention, you do see Billy the Puppet, and then you get your first scare from the pigman there in the red robes, there in this maze again. The first trap you go through is the same trap that you started the maze with in 2009, which was the barbed wire trap from the first movie. Your thoughts on that, of them redoing that trap, Mom, for a second time?
I really like that trap. I saw some of the Saw movies. I don't know how many I saw.
No, you saw all of them.
Oh, I did see all of them.
You did see all of them.
Okay. So I did see all the Saw movies.
Up to the final chapter. And then that's when you stopped. And I continued watching them.
Right. I like the barbed wire, trap. It looked amazing in the maze, and I really liked it.
But it was like the same thing that you saw in 2009, so you kind of knew what to expect.
I wish they put a different trap in the front, but I can understand why they did it too.
Right. So the next trap was a brand new one that they added this year for 2010, and I do not remember what Saw movie this is from. But there's a scene from one of the movies where there's a fat guy and there is a black woman, and they are cutting their skin because they have a scale that they need to get to a certain height so they can get released, and the other one gets killed. And of course, you see the black girl pretending to cut her arm off. So that was a new trap that they added for that year. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on that, Mom?
I'm glad they put a new trap in there. I don't know what Saw movie it was from, like James said, but I really enjoyed that one. Mm-hmm. What your thoughts, James?
I was really surprised that they were doing that because, when I saw it in the movie, I was like, how are they going to replicate this in a live thing? And I think they did pretty well. Like the lady's arm was not cut off like what you saw in the movie, but they made the effect like, her hand was coming off, but not fully. But they did the best they could with that scene.
They did.
So the next one after that, is of course they have to bring back the bathroom trap, and of course you see a dummy of Jigsaw on the floor. You see Dr. Gordon cutting his leg off, and then of course at the end where the tub is, you don't see Adam. He's the guy that scares you into the next room. And as we said, in 2009, they really pumped the smell so badly in there that's when you got sick. But I noticed a difference in 2010 where it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
I said when they announced for 2010 Saw was coming back, like, I better not get sick again. Mm-hmm. But I didn't.
Yeah. So then the next trap that you go through is, of course, another one that they did in 2009. And this is from Saw 2. There's a scene where someone goes into a furnace and there's 3 needles and he's trying to pull the right one and he pulls the wrong needle and it locks the door behind him and he gets burned to death. So they recreated that scene again for 2009. Mm-hmm. The next scene, this I think was really cool. Of course, I want to confirm that both in 2009 and 2010, when they did the scene, there was no girl that was actually naked. I'm just going to clarify that right now. They did the scene from number 3, where Jigsaw is spraying water in the girl, and she's in the freezer, and she gets frozen to death. And then Jeff comes out and scares you in that room. And that was the same thing that we saw in 2009. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, the girl.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a dummy.
That was
a dummy. It was great they used the dummy, not the live actor, because she would have got hurt.
Right, because how are you going to replicate that in a thing?
You can't.
You can't. So
she would have got hurt in the freezer scene, but I'm glad they used the dummy. What about you, James?
I was glad too. Yeah. So then another scene that you saw was the detective that had the water bots over his head and he couldn't breathe. And I want to give a shout out because one of my friends named Christopher Brian Gomez, he's a famous actor that's done a lot of musicals. He used to work for the Glendale Center Theater, doing the Christmas Carol. He's also done. He used to work at the Hollywood Wax Museum where I used to work. So this guy played the detective, and I got to see him a lot of times as we went through this maze, and we became good friends. So shout out to him. Yeah. So then, the next scene is the needle pit scene, where of course you had not Jeff, but one of the bullies, trying to pretend to throw her into the pit, and then of course one of the pigmen come out and scare you. But your thoughts on those two scenes?
The water scene on the head, that was amazing. But I didn't know it was Christopher until you pointed it out a couple of hours ago.
Yeah.
Great job. Shout out to Chris. The needle trap, every time I see that, someone gonna get hurt. But those were not real needles.
No.
Pretend needles.
Yeah, and as we explained in the 2009, they didn't do a giant pit on the floor because they couldn't do that in a live haunted house. So what they did was they built this cynical and they just built it up and make it look like it was a pit of needles on the ground. Right. So, yeah.
That was great how they did that.
That was great, yeah. And of course, they had to bring back the fan favorite. The bathroom scene was the fan favorite, but the other one is a fan favorite. The reverse bear trap with Amanda. Yeah. Basically, if you don't know that scene, it's basically Amanda has to find this key, and she thinks her dead friend is dead, but he's actually alive, and she cuts his stomach, and somewhere in his guts is the key to get to the reverse bear trap, but she only has a minute to get it, and of course she does survive, and then she eventually becomes one of Jigsaw's minions in later movies. But in the first one, she's a victim herself. Your thoughts on that, of them bringing that scene back?
I really liked that scene in the first movie when I saw it. It's great. I liked it. What about you?
I did like it too. I thought it was very well done.
It was.
It was very well done.
It was very well done.
Yeah, I really did enjoy it. Yeah. All right, so moving on. So they did change the finale of this maze. They did not have the same finale that they had in 2009. So if you went for the 2009 maze, you ended up back in Jigsaw's lair, where you saw the first victim of Jigsaw. He was the guy that pushed the door onto his wife, where John Kramer lost the baby, and it was the drug addict that Amanda knew, and he puts these sharp knives on him. He cuts through them, and then he falls into a barbed wire They did that live in 2009, and then the final room for 2009's one was Jigsaw in the bed, and of course it's from number 3 where you see the wife of Jeff like with the shotgun collar. Jeff comes out, pretends to kill Jigsaw, and everything's a chaos. So they decided to change the ending where it was based off 2 new traps instead of that ending. So the 2 new traps they had at the very end for this year for 2010 was a new trap where you saw the judge that was tied up, and then pig guts were like filling his pit. I think that was from Saw 4, I think, or Saw 5. It was one of the Saw movies. And then the final trap that you walk past by, I call it the Twister trap, where it's from number 3 or number 4, and there's a black man that's tied to a device, and his hands start getting turned the other way, his feet get turned, and it was painful. So the ending of this maze is, that's the final room that you go in, and then you're out. And what I like to think it's like the back alley of Jigsaw's workshop, and you see Billy the puppet in a dumpster, and then of course one of the pigmen comes out and scares you, and then of course that's the end of the maze. But what did you think about the changes to the end?
I really like the changes. I'm glad they put 2 new traps in there
for the ending of the maze.
For the ending of the maze,
and then the alley scene where you see Billy, you think you're done, and of course a pigman comes out and chases you out of the maze.
I like the 2 new traps, and every time the pigman got me in the alleyway, I'm looking at Billy, and then he comes right behind. I really like that one last scare to run you out of the maze. Mm-hmm. I really like this maze. Mm-hmm. Very, very much.
All right. Yeah. Oh, man.
What do you think?
I really did enjoy this one. But, unfortunately, we went to see Saw Return for a couple of years. And when we do have Saw come back, they had it in a different location. But you're gonna have to wait until we get to that year. But you know which year I'm talking about, where we had some mazes on the back lot.
Yes.
That's the only hint. Mm-hmm. That's the only hint that I'm gonna give you is the Saw maze was located on the back lot, but I'm not going to tell you which year. So
wait until we get to that year, and then you'll find out.
And then you'll find out.
Yep.
All right. So moving on. So that was the final maze that we had to talk about. So now we're going to talk about the Terror Tram, Chucky's Revenge. So I kind of like the story for this year because, if you guys don't know, Chucky used to have his own show called Chucky's Insult Emporium. And a lot of people complained about it. And he wanted to get his revenge on the people that canceled his show. Of course, that's what the backstory for this Terror Tram is. So it was located on the studio tour, and so here's a description, and I'm gonna read this for you, and I'm gonna do a whole bunch of reading because not only does it have the description for what this Terror Tram is, it also there's a tram video that plays that gives you the whole backstory, but unfortunately I can't play the video for you, so I'm just going to read you what it says. So, after years of disappointment and annoyance, Chucky wants to take his revenge on Howie Hornets. For over 2 decades, the tortured soul of serial killer Charles Lee Ray has been trapped inside a pint-sized good guy doll named Chucky. Now Chucky has hijacked Howie Hornet's most massive attraction, the Terror Tram, and has recruited some of the most infamous killers in horror history to help him take his ultimate revenge. When you step off the tram and walk through the Hollywood's scariest sets that keep your eyes peeled for the urban legend La Llorona, legend has it that who that hear her cries will be marked for death. And of course, take a look out for Norman Bates as you pass by the iconic Psycho house and the Bates Motel from Hollywood's horror classic Psycho. This year, the Terror Tram will live up to its name like never before. Enjoy your last ride. So, this is the tram video, and this is what it says. In 1988, moviegoers were introduced to a new kind of horror, a demented killer trapped inside a body of a good guy doll, a doll named Chucky. Chucky was an instant hit with horror fans, spreading his frightening success, sequels, and more violent than the last. Then in 1999, Chucky stumbled upon the world of taking his bride. A few years later, welcomed their first child. They welcomed their first child. Chucky became one of the Hollywood's biggest stars. Interviews, magazines, toy and clothing line. It even seems that there was no limit to Chucky's success. But Hollywood's a freaking bitch. The years of shooting, stabbing, slicing, cutting, crashing, chopped, burned, butchered, melted, and explosions have taken the toll on Chucky. Now even the crowds have begun to show. Rumors of drinking and gambling filled the tabloids as major cases of domestic violence. Even Chucky's trademarked banter was starting to get old. The movie deals dried up and Hollywood turned its back on Chucky. The final straw came when Universal canceled Chucky's most popular show at Howie Hornets. The same year, the Universal backlot mysteriously burned down. The studios issued a coverage story, but everyone knows who was behind the fire. It seems that Hollywood has not seen the last of Chucky. Your thoughts on that, Mom?
He got his revenge, very much so. I like how they introduced that before you get off the tram. Very well done.
Yeah.
Very well done. They did the backstory, and he took his revenge for sure.
He did.
What do you think?
Man, I love how, the Terror Tram this year had the backstory because, the show was offensive and, Universal was trying these different things. And then, of course, the tie-in with Chucky and all that stuff was really, really cool.
Right.
So, yeah. So, as you enter the studio tour loading area, you'll see some of Chucky's killer dolls roaming around before you get on the tram. So even before you hear this video and all that stuff,
when you're
in line,
you see a lot of Chuckies.
You see these roaming killer dolls that are Chucky's minions.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So So basically, as you're on the terror tram, they check. So they're taking you to a back lot, and there's these different things that are happening on the back lot. So they send security out, and they show a footage of a security guy, and of course he's smoking and drinking and all that, and he's like, everything's fine, nothing's to worry about, and stuff like that. And basically he picks up and says, whose doll is that? Did anyone lose a doll? And then of course Chucky comes to life and kills one of the security guards. There's two of them that you see in the video. So of course the first one's dead. So then you get to the Whoville set, which is your first stop. And in the Whoville area, when they still had it, so at this point they still had the Whoville sets, but I think it's 1 or 2 more years, and then eventually they get rid of it. You're raided by the Chainsaw Gang, of course, or Chucky's killer doll minions, and then of course there's 2 or 3 Chuckies that are running around in this area as well. So nothing really too special.
No.
Next area is you enter the Bates Motel. So you still go through the side entrance and then around into the Bates Motel. There's eventually at some point where you don't go into that side entrance and you walk around the entire until you get to the Bates Motel. But they were still using that side entrance for this terror tram. And basically this area did not have a theme. Just a lot of people dressed up as Norman Bates, as his mother in the blue dress, and then some of the victims. So, really did not have a theme for this area. Your thoughts so far on the terror tram?
I liked it, but they could have done more at the Bates Motel.
Yeah.
A lot more characters in the Bates Motel.
But
otherwise, it was okay.
It was okay. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but
just so to me.
All right. And also another thing, we still have the dirt lot, so that we're not going to get rid of that for at least a couple more years. So the dirt path and half of the hilltop was themed to La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. You'll see a couple of gravestones, and then a lot of people dressed up as La Llorona, and as you're going up the hill, you have those guys in the camouflage suits that have the shaker cans and, scare you, and I always hated those freaking guys. You know which ones I'm talking about, Mom.
Dressed up as camouflage. They scared me a couple of times.
Yeah.
Really bad. And I wasn't expecting it.
Really bad. I was not expecting that either.
No. Neither was I.
The other half of the hilltop was where you saw Chucky killer dolls, or his minions, cutting people's faces, and then a couple of small Chuckies roaming around there as well. And then the last couple, like in 2008 and 2009, they had a sheep maze. One was themed to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then in 2009 it was themed to Halloween with Michael Myers. This year they did not have a sheep maze that you had to go through.
I was surprised on that.
You just had some people still dressed up as Norman Bates, with some victims coming out and screaming as you got close to the Psycho House. And still, no photo op at the Bates, at the Psycho House.
Yeah.
Not the Bates Motel, the Psycho House.
Psycho House. Yep.
Still no photo op at the Psycho House this year. But there was someone dressed up as Norman scaring you. So, yeah. Then you went to the War of the World sets. This was themed to like 2 different things. You had some of the Chucky characters in there, but then the most of the theme was zombies. or mutated people.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't understand what that War of the Worlds thing was. It really did not make any sense to me. Then as you exit the War of the Worlds set, you're greeted by the Chainsaw Guys again that you saw over at the Whoville set. And then, of course, you get back on the tram, but before you go back to the unload area, there's one more stop that you got to make. As you depart the War of the Worlds set, you are dispatched into the Mummy Tunnel by mistake, because you get a call from security saying, the road ahead of you is blocked, so you have to go this way. And this is the second security guard that you see in the footage, and he says, "Hey, did anyone drop a doll?" Of course, it's Chucky again. He kills the guard. Chucky tries to, the tour guide tries to call the dispatcher. Chucky answers. He asks what happened with his supervisor, and he throws a head up and says, "I killed him like how I'm going to kill all of you." And there's a symbol that says, "Please stand by." At this point, you're going into the Mummy Tunnel, and then another person comes out, and he's an electrician, and he says, "Don't worry, folks, we'll get you out of here in just a moment." Stuff like that. He picks up a doll, and of course, it's the Chucky doll again. So he kills the electrician. So of course, the electrician's not going to help you. He says that, "I'm going to now kill all of you. In 10 seconds, your tram is going to be sprayed with acid," which is not acid. It's just water from the Mummy Tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to the tour guide that, "I'm going to take over your body and mind if you don't mind." He does his chant. The video goes down, and water gets sprayed on you. As you're leaving the Mummy Tunnel, the tour guide comes back up. You hear Chucky's voice. He's like, "Hello, hello, is this thing on?" And they do a little sign saying, "Well, it worked. Fiction." And then, of course, you go back to the unload station, and that is the whole Terror Tram Chucky's Revenge. So, your thoughts on that, Mom?
Okay. I like the Terror Tram, but 2 complaints. They should have had more people at the base motel.
Or at least should have had a theme.
And, they should have had more people on the Terror Tram than they did.
Yeah.
I liked it.
I understand where they were trying to go with the story with Chucky.
Right.
But it kind of just fell flat on its face.
It did. That's my next thing. I didn't really like the Terror Tram that year, but it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in yours, but they improved the Terror Tram immensely.
Yes.
Through the years.
Yes.
But
this one, it worked good at some elements, but then some elements just fell flat on their face.
That's what I was going to say next, James. So it was okay. I got some good scares, but I didn't really like it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. All right, guys. So to end this podcast, we are going to go through the scare zones really quick. Nothing too much about them. They're themed, and we're going to talk about our little feelings about it. Don't really have that much notes for scare zones because, some of them were the same from a couple of years, and then some that were new that were just, you understood the theming when you read the details of what this scare zone was. So, first scare zone that we're going to talk about is called Nightmares. From the front of the park up to the entrance of House of Horrors.
Right.
Here's the description. 1-2, Freddy's coming for you. Step through the turnstiles of Halloween Horror Nights and enter the world of nightmares where Freddy Krueger is watching you every move. One scene is 13. You'll never sleep again. So they had a statue of Freddy that was silver. Again, he was back outside. Just like in 2008, they did have the Freddy Fly Girls out in front this year, and then they had a couple of chainsaw guys, which I tried looking up photos and videos of what the scare zone was, but it was really hard to find some on YouTube and photos. But there were chainsaw guys, but I don't remember what they were dressed up as. But that first scare zone is usually where you'll find chainsaw guys every single year. So, your thoughts on that, Mom?
I always like the chainsaw guys. Every year I've been going. This one was a good scare zone. I really like this one.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, James?
I did really like them. I just wish I could remember what the chainsaw guys were.
I know. I'm trying to remember too, and I cannot remember.
But a lot of people remember the Freddy Fly Girls. That's like what people remember the most about the scare zone.
Yeah.
The scare zone.
The girls.
The girls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, so the next one that we're going to talk about, this was a brand new scare zone for this year, for 2010. It was called Clowns, and this scare zone was there for 2010, and then it returned for 2011 and 2012. So you're going to be hearing this scare zone for 3 years, but they did change it every single year, so it wasn't the same theme. So that's what I liked about the scare zone. Murder and mayhem has come over as a violent gang of killer clowns come over to the Big Apple, or aka New York Street. And their circus has come to town and is looking to destroy people. So you have a lot of different clowns with chainsaws. Different from the ones that were up in front. And the one thing that I will never forget is they had a ringleader that was insulting people all night long.
I remember him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally remember him.
Yeah.
He insulted me a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, sir, bring it on.
Yeah. And they also had some stilt walkers in this area dressed up as jokers.
Right.
Joker clowns. But yeah, I just remember this scare zone being so amazing.
This was one of my favorite scare zones. I really liked it. I liked the remaster, assaulting people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things he said were funny.
Uh-huh.
But this was one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Yours too, James?
Yeah, this was one of my favorites. There was my other favorite for this year was the Nightmare. So the first two scare zones, the rest that we're going to be talking about were okay. I mean, some of them were good, some of them were bad, but my top two this year was Nightmare and Clowns. Clowns was my absolute favorite this year.
Yeah, I really like that one. I agree with you. Those were my top two, James, too.
Right. So the next one we're going to talk about is La Llorona. This was on the Western Street.
Mm-hmm.
And it's plain and simple. They had a lot of people dressed up as La Llorona, looking for her lost children. They had some people dressed up as her dead children, some dead skeletons. Pretty much that's what it was. And here's the description for this maze, or the scare zone. For the first time, crossing paths with La Llorona, who drowned her children and finds herself haunting the living, wondering where her lost children are away, and looking for new souls to replace them. So that was pretty much what this scare zone was. And this was one of the small scare zones. Do you remember Western Street? That's where we exited out of Friday the 13th.
Yes. I remember that street.
Mm-hmm.
This one was okay. It wasn't my top favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But it was okay. I got a few scares out of there, but not really.
Yeah. I really just, it was okay.
Yeah. It was okay.
And this was the first year that they did something with La Llorona, mm-hmm. which is going to turn into something much bigger that they did in 2011 and 2012. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. But this is another thing that I'm hitting at is this scare zone became something much bigger. And mm-hmm. you're going to have to wait until we do our 2011 history video / podcast to find out what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one was Lunatics, Baker Street, aka London Street. The Whitechapel Asylum is a home to dangerous inmates that are running all over London and now have taken the asylum and slashed their caretakers and ran us in the asylum and the streets of London. This one was okay, but I remember this one, they put way too much fog in this. You could barely see in this scare zone. Do you remember that? And then they also had the lightning to make it sound like it was a thunderstorm.
I didn't really like the scare zone because of my condition with my knees. I only went through this one once.
Well, we went through it a couple of times,
but I didn't like the fog, really.
Yeah.
You could not see in front of you.
Yeah.
Too much fog and too much lightning.
And then towards the end, they kind of lifted the fog and, still, the characters were cool. They were just basically patients from the asylum.
Right.
And this was not really a memorable scare zone that
it wasn't one of my favorites either.
Yeah. So.
No.
No.
Yeah.
So our next scare zone, this is a returning scare zone from 2009 Freaks. It's the Carnival of Freaks that have set up on French Street, and it's an out of work sideshow performers that set up camp in the streets of Paris and are running low on food, and the Freaks have taste for human flesh. So you had like the two-headed freak, you had elephant freak, all that different stuff. And it was basically the same scare zone that you saw in 2009.
You want my opinion?
Your opinion, yes.
Didn't like it. Didn't like it the year before. No. Boring.
Yeah, I
didn't like it at all.
I did not like it at all. It was basically the same thing that you saw in 2009.
Mm-hmm. They never changed it up.
They never changed it up. It was the same set. It was the same characters. Everything was pretty much the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Didn't like it at all.
Yeah, I just, yeah. And, of course, our last scare zone that we need to talk about is pigs. This was on the lower lot, and this is themed to Saw. Jigsaw's pig face followers or minions have taken over the lower lot as you're heading down to Saw Game Over, and you pass chain-wheeling pigs. So, pretty much the same thing they did in 2009, where it was the pig people in the red robes, and they were just chasing you as you were going down to the Saw maze.
Right.
On the lower lot. Same thing that we saw in 2009. Really, not really impressed with this scare zone.
No. They should have put something else down there. Or nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the pigs. Wasn't really scary for me.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Straightforward, no.
Straightforward. Yeah. It was the thing that I saw in 2009. It was the exact same. Didn't really put any thought into it. So, they just used the same thing they had for 2009. Because I guess at the time they didn't know how big Horror Nights was going to be, and they just wanted to save some money. I guess that's what it was, or something. I'm not really sure.
Right.
But yeah, that is going to wrap up part 2 or episode 20 of our Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood 2010 history video / podcast. Part 2, episode 20 of the Jimmypancakes20 Show. And so before we wrap this up, I want to thank again my co-host Marsha for joining me for this part 2.
You're welcome.
And any closing thoughts before I wrap up this podcast / video?
Good year.
I mean, we still have one more thing to talk about, but
right.
We'll give our overall thing at part 3. But I'm saying for this part in particular.
I like some of the mazes, some of the scare zones.
Mazes is a form of the word maze.
And then
maze can have a few meanings.
I'm sorry, guys, if you're hearing that. That is our Alexa going off. Alexa, quiet. Sorry about that, guys.
So, I liked it this year, but some of the things I did not like.
All right.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
My thoughts. Yeah, it was good. I did enjoy the Saw Maze. I did enjoy parts of the Terror Tram. I did enjoy the first 2 scare zones, but then the rest were either something new that they tried but that didn't really work, or they were just repeats that I saw from 2009. And again, I want to apologize for our Alexa going off. I'm not going to take that part out, so that's just going to be in the podcast / video. But yeah, so I'm going to wrap up this video / podcast. If you want to follow my co-host, Marsha, on her social media sites, she has X, aka Twitter, and she has an Instagram. Her links will be down in the description below. And if you want to follow your host, Mr. James, aka Jimmy Pancakes, you can follow me on my Facebook, my X, aka Twitter, Instagram, and also on TikTok. And part 3 will be coming out soon. I will let you guys know on my social media sites when that video is going to be coming out. And I'm going to be doing 2 other videos before I go to Midsummer Scream. Midsummer Scream is next weekend. I'm going to be filming a ton of videos over there. And those are going to be going up after Midsummer Scream. So look forward to those. I have 3 more videos that I need to put up before Midsummer Scream that will be coming out roughly, in the next couple of days. And then Midsummer Scream, and then those videos and podcasts will be coming out later. So, Mom, thank you for joining me again.
You're welcome.
My name is James. I was your host. Marsha, my mom, was your co-host. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you for the next video/podcast coming soon.